الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the Pulse podcast by Uplift Dawah. I am your host, Brother Yusuf Warsami. We have an amazing podcast for you today. We have an incredible guest with us, my beloved brother Anas. Let's get started, inshallah. Bismillah. Jazakallahu khair for joining us. We have an incredible show for you today. Topic at hand: science, atheism, and the arguments for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have with me my beloved brother Anas. Brother Anas, welcome to the show.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to everyone watching.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. MashaAllah. First and foremost, I know you. We've been working with each other for a long time, alhamdulillah, doing da'wah. So for those who don't know you, Brother Anas, can you tell us a little bit about you, inshallah? Bismillah.
Bismillah. So I'm Anas. Basics, tiny history. It's pretty long, but it's still, I'll try to make it tiny. I was born here. Then I moved to India, lived there for a couple of years. Then I moved to Dubai, lived there for a couple of years. Moved back to India, lived there for a couple of years. And then now I'm back here, alhamdulillah. So I guess you could say I've lived in the East, the Middle East, as well as the West, alhamdulillah. But right now I'm 17 years old, just graduated high school, alhamdulillah, and will be starting college at UW next year, inshallah.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. How old are you, bro? Just so that the people know.
I'm 17.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, MashaAllah. Allahu Mubarak. Allahu Mubarak. I'm really honored to have you. And there's a lot of things that we are going to discuss, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. I'm just letting the people come in, inshallah. For everyone who's here, please go ahead and comment, inshallah. Say assalamu alaikum to everyone who is joining us. Make sure that you share this podcast in all of your platforms, inshallah. And the reason why is because many people are going to hear about this. Trust me when I tell you this. Atheism has become a very serious problem within our community, and we need to deal with it. And so that is why we are here. We want to deal with it, and we want to do it now. There are people out there, especially young people, who have a lot of doubt. We want to make sure that those doubts are removed, inshallah. So please go ahead, share this, and we will go right on, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. Barakallahu feek, jazakallahu khair. So the first thing that I want to ask you, Brother Anas, is what made you get involved in da'wah?
It's a good question. About 2 years ago, a little more than 2 years ago, my brother actually knew about Uplift Dawah because he'd been living in Seattle before I moved here. So he told me that let's go to the table one day. I heard that they're very knowledgeable. They do great work, alhamdulillah. So it's winter break. We have nothing to do. Let's just take a couple of hours off our Saturday and go and join them, inshallah. So the credit for everything that I'm doing, alhamdulillah, definitely goes to my brother, because he was the first one that took me to the table and that introduced me to everyone. So I went to the table and I started meeting everyone at the table. And at the start, the first few weeks, all I did was I would just stand on the sidelines and listen to knowledgeable brothers that Uplift Dawah has, such as Yusuf and so many other brothers, give da'wah and call other people to Islam. Probably my primary job the first few weeks was just handing out flyers and trying to attract people to ask questions. But when they would ask questions, Yusuf or someone more knowledgeable would come in and then take over the da'wah. But then after that, slowly, I think the third or the fourth week, Yusuf came to me and he told me that next week, whenever someone asks you a question, I'm not going to help you. You're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to answer the question yourself. I'm not going to help you. And I got so scared because I thought to myself that what if someone comes and asks me a question about Islam that I don't know the answer to? What if I give an answer that is not right? So I remember from that Saturday until the next week, Saturday, I spent countless hours online just looking at stuff, looking at the resources that people had given me, that Yusuf and others had given me, just trying to get the answer to as many questions as possible. And every shower I would take, every time I was in front of the mirror, I found myself automatically trying to build up answers to arguments and trying to practice my arguments and whatnot. And then the dreaded day came, or should I say, the blessed day came, alhamdulillah. And then everyone was praying salah. Me and a couple brothers were the ones not praying. And then someone came and asked me a question. And it was the classic, basic 101 dawah question about what is the relationship between Islam and terrorism and whatnot. And this question I had practiced so much, so many times I had imagined it in my head and whatnot. So I started giving him the answer. But then I realized that dawah it's not just reading off of a script. It's not just reading from a book and then giving dawah. Because he started saying things that I wasn't expecting him to say. But alhamdulillah, other people helped me out. And through all my experiences giving dawah, I've learned that dawah, if it comes from the heart, that's the best form of dawah.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. It's been an interesting experience, alhamdulillah. And we've been side by side in the street dawah for a long time now, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. And I thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us and permitting us to be able to do such a thing. What a blessing it is to do that, alhamdulillah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have chosen so many people to do it, but he chose us. And and I'm really truly happy to be side by side with you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us. Allahumma ameen. We see everything at that table because it is a public place. It is actually in Pike Place Market. We come there and there's a big banner on the table that says, "Ask me about Islam." Our purpose for being there is very clear. Everyone knows exactly why we are there because that banner says all of it. Ask us about Islam. Anything. You could ask anything. And so the people come to us and they ask us specific questions about Islam, the hardest questions you can imagine. And we have to stand there and answer everything that we possibly can in the best way we possibly can, using hikmah in talking to those people. The question that I want to ask you is, how has your experience been in doing dawah at that table?
Alhamdulillah, it's definitely been a roller coaster. A roller coaster that I've enjoyed and I hope I'll continue to enjoy, inshallah. Started off very normal because I wouldn't really do anything at the table. And then brothers at the table started recommending me to sources and places where I can learn. And they started teaching me one-on-one as well, alhamdulillah. So over there I started learning, started coming across questions I would never imagine because I never stepped into the field of dawah or people asking questions about Islam. But alhamdulillah, as I came across more and more questions and people taught me the answers and whatnot about Islam, I realized the true beauty of Islam, alhamdulillah. I saw again the beauty of this faith that a lot of us have been gifted with by birth. And that's when I truly started appreciating the work that Uplift Dawah was doing and the dawah that we were doing. Alhamdulillah, over there, from then, it only was positive from then on, yeah. I kept learning more and more, kept talking to more people, started trying to gain as more knowledge as I could. Alhamdulillah, and it helps having so many knowledgeable brothers around me to help me out. And it's fun at the table because sometimes you have regular conversations, but a lot of the times, and almost every single day, you have people who come with the weirdest questions, with the weirdest claims ever. We have people that claim they get revelation every single day and all sorts of things. So it's been fun. Very, very thankful to Uplift Dawah for giving us this platform. And I've got all sorts of people at the table. Alhamdulillah.
Speaking of meeting people at the table, There's a specific person that I would like to about. There's this one specific lady that used to come to the table looking specifically for you, and she would not talk to anyone else. If you are not there, she would ask us, "Is Anas here?" And then if you're not there, she would leave. I think she was in Dawah. Can you tell us anything about her? She was very interesting.
Yeah, so she's a really nice woman, a Christian woman, and she would come almost every single week, trying to talk to me, trying to have conversations with me. Sometimes our conversations wouldn't even be related to religion. She'd just ask me how my day was, how I was doing in school, if I needed help in school or whatnot. And soon enough, I realized that with a really good intention, she came to the dawah table to give me dawah, not the other way around. And it was incredible, and I truly appreciate it because it was coming from the heart. She was very sincere, and she wanted me to look closer into what she was talking about. So I had conversations with her. I spoke with her. She met me outside of the dawah table too, and gifted me a couple of books to read that I have read, alhamdulillah. And very interesting. She's a very good, I say probably friend of mine. And yeah, I try to give her dawah. She tries to give me dawah, and it's always a spinning table of who gives who dawah.
SubhanAllah, I'll tell you what, some of those experiences that we've had are really interesting. And each and every one of us has had incredible experiences at that dawah table. I'll tell you about one interesting experience that I have had. While I was standing there was a lady, and she had tattoos everywhere, and you could see she was into Gothic culture, and just very dark, and tattoos everywhere, and ear holes. It was just crazy. But she was passing by, and I smile at everybody that's passing by. The sunnah is to smile at everybody. It's charity to smile. So I was smiling at her, and she was passing by, and she looked at me, and she stopped. And she just had this dead stare at me. And I didn't expect this, so I'm shocked. Here's a lady. I'm trying to be, as pious as possible. The lady's looking at me. I don't want to look at her too much, but I'm wondering what's going on. Why is she staring at me like that? And so I look down, and I'm trying to keep contact with her, and I finally look up, and she's still there staring at me, right? And so I'm weirded out a little bit by now. So I'm trying to figure out what to do. I'm confused a little bit. And so I say, "Hi, how are you?" Just to break that ice. And she looked at me straight, just this dead stare, akhi. And she says, "Satan hates you." Wallah. I'm not even kidding you, akhi. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I was shocked. I did not expect to happen at all. And I broke out laughing. I don't know why. I just broke out laughing because I didn't expect it at all. I know he hates me because of the work that I'm doing, but I didn't expect someone to deliver that message. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. SubhanAllah. So I looked at her and tell him that I hate him too. and wallahi, I did, and I do. And I wanted to make that very clear. SubhanAllah, as soon as I said that, she walked away and just went about her day as if nothing happened. It just shows you the people that we meet sometimes, Mm-hmm. There was another time where I met someone. He was walking a little bit away, and he slowed down, and my eyes caught on him. He looked at everything. He saw that we were Muslims. You could tell he didn't like it. And he just looked at me, and he just said the F word really slowly without, just so that I can see it through his lips. I didn't even need to hear it. I just see it through his lips. And I just smiled, and that's it. But you get all kinds of people, subhanAllah. But this is the blessing that comes with this type of work. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us, and we know Allah is protecting us. So we are not worried about anything. We're there for one purpose, which is to create dialogue and love and peace between the people, and to call people to what we believe is the best way of life without really undermining other people's religion. which they love, right? We're
Yeah.
not saying anything bad. I just want them to compare and talk to us and have and examine it, inshallah, so that we can remove the veil from the fitrah, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. And that, we meet a lot of people, and some of the people that we do meet and we do run into are atheists. And that's actually the we have at hand today. So I want to ask you, before we jump into this huge topic, let's define some terms. What is an atheist?
So there's very wide definitions of atheism, but the basic one would be someone that doesn't believe in God. And there's many subdivisions in atheism itself, but the umbrella definition of atheism is someone that doesn't believe in God. The two main subdivisions, I would say, are what I like to call positive atheists and negative atheists. So positive atheists are people that say that the reason why they don't believe in God is because they have evidence that God doesn't exist. Whereas negative atheists, either they say that there's not enough evidence, or they say that I just don't care enough to think about whether God exists or not, and I just don't care enough to believe in a God. So there's positive atheists and negative atheists.
Positive atheists and negative atheists. Let's talk about those who make the positive claim, which is God does not exist. Is this a positive claim?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of the times, people that we have at the table are positive atheists who say that God doesn't exist and whatnot. And sometimes what people do at the table and around the world is they try to go into evidences for arguments of God and whatnot, which is fine. It's a very good way to do it. But one thing to remember is that when someone claims that God doesn't exist because I can prove that God doesn't exist, then the question falls upon them. The evidence, the burden for evidence falls upon them to try to produce evidence that can disprove God's existence. So a lot of the times, that's the first thing I ask them. If they say that I have evidence that God doesn't exist, I turn it around and I ask them, what is the evidence that God doesn't exist? If you're so confident that God doesn't exist, what is making you so confident in that belief? What is the evidence? And almost every single time, people just don't have an argument for that. Because a lot of people, they're atheists because society makes them atheists. They're atheists because it's cool to be atheists. They don't want to follow certain laws. They don't want to follow certain rules that religion puts upon them, which is why they're atheists. So they go around claiming that they have evidence God doesn't exist. But once you ask them, they truly don't have any evidence that God doesn't exist.
So for those who, please do let us know if you can hear us well. Say salam when you do come in, inshallah, binillahi kareem. Say salam to your brothers that are watching this with you. We want to make this into a conversation so that you guys can benefit a lot. Share it with other brothers who might have doubt out there. Trust me, there's a lot of people out there who are not sharing any information with you, but in their hearts, there are a lot of doubts. Today, we want to go ahead and clear that, inshallah, binillahi kareem. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask us in the comments, and we'll try to go ahead and deal with it if we get some time, inshallah, binillahi kareem. Jazakallah khair, everyone. So when we're talking about atheists who claim or who say or make the positive claim that God does not exist, what type of evidence are they looking for? Are they using science to try and prove God? And what does science deal with?
Yeah. So I would say personal experience, as well as from what others have told me, that a lot of the times when laymen and regular people come and they ask for evidence of God existing, or they say that they have evidence against God existing, they say that they want scientific evidence, or when we bring forth an evidence, they say that this isn't scientific, you can't test it, and because it's not scientific, it isn't true. But this is a very, very basic level of, I guess I would say, ignorance, or I would say misinformation, that science is the only way to truth, that science is the only way you can know whether something is right or not. And when someone asks for scientific evidence for God existing, it's it's a very self-refuting claim, kind of, because science, by definition, only works and only deals with the things that you can see, you can observe, and you can test and whatnot. And by definition, God exists in a realm that you cannot see, that you cannot observe, you cannot test, or whatnot. So science does not have the capability, it does not have the tools to produce evidence for God. So when we say, or when someone says that there's no scientific evidence for God, us as Muslims, we have no problem with that. The reason why there's no scientific evidence for God is because science is not strong enough. Not because God doesn't exist, but just because science does not deal with that area of metaphysics and that area of God. So it's a very ridiculous claim when people ask for scientific evidence for God existing.
MashaAllah. It sounds to me like you're saying you don't have any issue or problems with science. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, definitely. Without a doubt.
MashaAllah. So in other words, we love science. There's no issue with science when it comes to Muslims. But are you saying that Muslims understand the limitations of science?
Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. So can you tell us about some of those limitations in using science to try and disprove God or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as I mentioned, science only deals with things that you can see, you can observe, you can test and whatnot. So when you have something that you see and you make a claim out of that, science will completely support it because you're making that claim based upon the data that you have. But it is very possible, and we have so many examples of in the future you get other data that contradicts the conclusion that you made in the past. And now with that new data that you observe, because we're always seeing new things, with that new data that you observe, your previous claim is falsified and you have to make another claim. So that is one of the major limitations of science. The fact that even in its own domain, even in the physical domain, science cannot lead you to objective truths which tell you that this thing is going to be right throughout time, throughout space, regardless of how many years we're on the universe, whatnot. If you see, for example, if you see the Big Bang Theory or the theory of how the universe came about, you'll see that there was a time where some people, or I would say the consensus, was that our universe has been existing from an infinite amount of time. That there was no start to the universe and it's just been going on and on and on. And this was the general consensus among scholars, among laymen, whatnot. But then that moved on, and now everyone knows of the Big Bang Theory, which says that our universe isn't infinite, and it actually did come into existence. The problem here is that science, according to science, if you go back in the past when they were talking about universe being infinite, there was no problem with it according to science. It was completely scientifically accurate because all the data that people had back then, it proves or it points to the conclusion that the universe is infinite. But in the future, we saw more data, we saw different things, we had developments in science and technology that led us to new data which suggested that the universe didn't exist from an infinite amount of time and it actually does have a beginning. And this is a problem with science because, or you could consider it a problem, but you could also consider it the beauty of science. The fact that every time we discover something new, we have the freedom to go back and revisit our previous conclusions and try to refine those conclusions. That is, I would say, one of the major limitations of science.
Now, some people might say, look at the beautiful progress of science. We're going to the moon, we're doing this, we're doing that. Science works. Mm-hmm. That's why we should use science, and it should be it is the only path to knowledge. What would you say to those people who think, look at all of the technology, look at all of the beauties we discovered, what would you say to the people who might claim that because science works, therefore it is the only route to knowledge?
So science works when it works. When it doesn't work, no one will speak about that. And there's so many countless experiments that lead to no conclusion, that lead to nothing. But even while saying that, we do accept that science is a beautiful tool. We do accept it works, and we do accept that if you want a society to progress in the physical world, in terms of technology and whatnot, science is probably one of the only ways to go forward, because that is what deals with the physical world. But the problem with saying that it's the only way to knowledge is, as we mentioned before, it has domains that it cannot access. For example, if someone cooks you a cake and brings you the cake for your birthday, let's say, you can use science to understand what they cooked the cake with and what degree temperature did they cook the cake or bake the cake, what ingredients are in the cake and whatnot. But science cannot tell you, it can never tell you, in fact, why did the person bake the cake? What was the reason behind him baking the cake? For that, you need to go speak to the person. You need to use the logical tools that we have been given, speech and comprehension and whatnot. And that person will tell you that the reason I baked this cake is because it's your birthday. I wanted to give it to you for your birthday. So science can deal with the physical, but it cannot deal with the other areas of the physical. And science in and of itself is very times reliant on something outside of science, which is testimony, like witness testimony. Not every single person or every single scientist goes and repeats every single experiment that has ever been committed in history so that they come to a conclusion. No, they just listen to what other people say and they adopt those. If someone says that the universe is the Earth is round, for example, a lot of scientists will agree and say yes, the Earth is round, but the majority of them haven't conducted any experiments to conclude that the Earth is round. And what they're doing is they're putting their faith in the people that are saying that the Earth is round, in the experiments that they say that they have performed, that they say that these conclusions have been arrived by them. So even science relies on unscientific, non-scientific methods of verification and whatnot.
That's very interesting. We know that there are many theories that people thought were true, and then later on, after maybe 100 or 200 years, they were overturned. And I think you mentioned one, which was that the universe was constant. It always existed. And then later on, they discovered the Big Bang. So because of these evidences, things always change. Why is it that things always change in science? Is it because it can't give you certainty?
It is to a certain extent because it can't give you certainty. And I would say the underlying reason for that is, as human beings, we constantly, every single day, every single year, we see new things, we observe new things, we experience something that we didn't know existed. For example, a lot of people claim, and I think it's true, that above 90% or around 90% of the ocean isn't even discovered yet. We don't even know what's in most of these oceans. So according to science, they might say that every single fish or the majority of the fish that exist in the ocean have gills, let's say. And according to science, that's a perfect explanation. That's a perfect conclusion. Nothing wrong with it. But in the future, when we develop technology that can go deep in those waters and can see what we cannot see now, maybe we come across many more fish that don't have gills than the fish that actually do have gills. So then science will tell us that actually no, the majority of fish don't have gills. So it is because it can't give you certainty, and that's because we always are seeing new things, we always are observing new things that we didn't see before.
That makes perfect sense. SubhanAllah. There's one thing that has to be said here. At the time when they thought that the universe was always constant, it was always there, that it didn't begin or it didn't start, something very interesting came to my mind. That is that at that moment when there was a complete agreement amongst the scientific scholars that the universe was constant, it was always there, it never began. This actually went against the Quran. The Quran tells us Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that always existed, that He's created everything. And so He's the only one who was not created. He created everything. So He existed while nothing else existed. And so we understand this fact from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Quran. But interestingly enough, at that very moment, this went against the consensus, the scientific consensus of the time. And so it's easy to see and understand that at that time, people probably looked at the Quran and said, this is not a scientific book. It contradicts science. When I didn't know what he was talking about, so forth. You hear this happening still to this day. Whenever they discover something or they create a new theory and they're now exploring that theory, they say things like, oh, the Quran doesn't know what he's talking about, simply because of the theory that they're looking at that moment. What should Muslims do whenever situations like this arise?
Okay. It's a very loaded question, subhanAllah. But I think we have to learn from our mistakes, and we have to move on and make sure that we don't commit them again. So a lot of people in the past, distant past and even recent past, it's been more in the recent past, distant past almost no one does it. But a lot of people have gone to the scientific arguments for the Quran, or the scientific evidences that are present in the Quran, and the scientific miracles in the Quran and whatnot. And basically what they're doing is they try to appeal to stuff that the Quran says, what some ayahs might refer to, and they're trying to say, this is what modern science believes, and this is exactly what the Quran says as well. So because the Quran 1400 years ago said something that the modern science is only discovering now, that means that the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is problematic because, as we saw just a couple of decades or maybe 100 years ago, people believed that the universe was didn't have a beginning and it was infinite. But the Quran clearly says that the universe has a beginning, it isn't infinite. So back then, science said that the Quran wasn't true. But now it changed, and now science, that aspect of science, it matches with what the Quran says. But there's nothing that's telling us that in the future, science isn't going to go back to the position that, okay, the universe was infinite. Because maybe they come across newer data which suggests to them that the universe was infinite. And they go back to that. So now if we appeal to the Quran saying that the reason why the Quran is true is because it says the earth it started off with a big bang or whatever. What if in 10 years, in 15 years, science says, no, it didn't start off with a big bang, there's some other definitions, explanations for how it started off, then your own argument is used against you and people say that the Quran is false. Now, a lot of people say that this is a form of a cop-out, that you're trying to say that don't use Quran in science because you're scared that maybe science will discover that something else which the Quran doesn't know, doesn't talk about or whatnot. But that's not the case at all, because in the Quran, almost in no cases are there explicit mentions of science or scientific theories or whatnot, because the Quran didn't come down as a scientific book. It came down as a religious book to bring people close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to teach them what to do, to teach them what not to do and everything. If the Quran had clear, definite explanations of quantum mechanics or how to build a car and all of that, would people in Mecca and would people in Medina read that and understand what's going on? Obviously not, because it would be speaking about atoms and positive charge and negative charge and all of that. So that is one of the problems, that science is always changing, the Quran isn't. If we establish that the Quran is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is al-alim and al-hakim, is all knowledgeable and all wise, we know for a fact that everything that is said in the Quran is true, regardless of what science says, because science always changes. So you don't change something which is true in order to fit something which changes. And there's a saying that don't cut your foot to fit the shoe, which is, I think it fits perfectly in this scenario, because if the shoe is smaller than your foot, you're not going to cut the foot to fit the shoe. You're going to buy a bigger shoe, or you're going to just throw that shoe away, because the foot is always going to stay the same. The shoe can change. It's the same thing with the Quran. The Quran is always going to stay the same. It's always going to be true because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that revealed it. So why would you change that in order to fit something which constantly changes? And another one I'll quickly go over. Another problem with trying to read scientific miracles in the Quran and whatnot is that a lot of times people read into verses things that the Sahaba and the Salaf never read. They read into verses trying to interpret science into them, and they're imposing science onto the Quran. They're forcing the Quran to say something instead of using the Quran to understand what it says, which is also a very dangerous thing. So it is best to stay away from trying to read science into the Quran, or trying to use the Quran to prove that science is false, science is true, whatnot, or any of that. The easiest stance and the most correct, most logical stance is that the Quran doesn't deal with science. Almost no explicit mentions of science. The Quran deals with an entirely different area which science doesn't deal with. It deals with theology, it deals with metaphysics. So take the Quran for what it is. Don't degrade it by trying to match it to something that cannot come up to its level. So any contradiction in the Quran and science, so what? If there's a contradiction, it's going to change in the future. Maybe it doesn't change in the future, right? But science, as we know, doesn't lead us to certainty. So that should never shake our beliefs. It should never make us question the authenticity of the Quran, because science changes, the Quran doesn't.
So, in other words, what you're saying is because of the problem of induction, science is always going to change. And the beauty of science is the fact that it does always change. So what they understand to be a fact today is not equivalent to a mathematical fact, 1 plus 2 equals 2. But rather, when they talk about scientific facts, what they're really saying is, according to the things we have at hand today, the observations we have at hand today, the tests we made today of the things we understand today, this is a fact. But that fact can change. Right? Scientific facts change, and they do change. And that's actually the beauty of science, that it does change and it can change. So when they're talking about scientific facts, make sure you understand that it's not equivalent to mathematical facts, which does not change. But science facts do change, and new evidences and new observations will always come, just like Anna said. And because of that, things will constantly change. And that's okay, and that's the beauty of science. But you're saying, do not now bring that into your theology. Is right. Understand that that's just science is a beautiful model that we use to understand the natural world and the uniformity of the world. But do not bring that, which is always changing, into your theology, into Islam, into your creed. It makes no sense. Because it's just two totally different things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, al-haq. He gives us the ultimate truth. Science is just trying to understand the how. He has to tell us the why. You mentioned this earlier, by the way. You said that there's a difference, the how and the why. The fact that your aunt cooked you a cake, you cannot find out by simply using science. You might be able to understand the chemistry of the cake. You might be able to break it down into how much sugar, how much flour went, but you will never know why she made it. Maybe she doesn't like you and she wants you to get diabetes. Right? Maybe. You never know. Unless you ask her, you don't know the why. There's a beautiful thing that someone said a long time ago. He says, knowing how the Ford vehicle is put together, and how it functions, and how it moves, and how fast it moves, understanding those facts, which is the how, will never give you the why, which is the one who created it, the agent created it. If all you have is the car, you will never be able to now derive from it who created it, which is Ford. right? You just, if you really think about it, you might come to understand it. If you're very, very rational, you might come to understand that it couldn't give all of this to itself. It couldn't come together by itself, that someone created it. But in order to know who exactly, he has to tell you. So there are two agents. There's the vehicle and then the creator of the vehicle. Knowing the vehicle does not automatically make you understand who exactly Ford is, right? And so this is one thing that people really truly need to understand. And I think a lot of people do get confused about this, and I think it's important that they do understand it. So the next question that I want to ask you is, now that we understand that science has no say in the metaphysical, it cannot answer the question of the existence of God, right? It can point you to it by evaluating and understanding the real world. You can, understand that there's a creator that has to have created all of this amazing universe, but it can't actually find God, because God is not a physical being. He is in the metaphysical, right? And so now that we know this and we understand science can give us that, do we have any rational arguments for the existence of God?
Yeah, we have, alhamdulillah, if you put science aside, we have so many arguments for the existence of God in so many different fields. You have rational arguments that we'll get into, inshallah. We have arguments from language. We have arguments just from the fitrah, from your innate disposition, which I would say, fall into the rational arguments. We have the miracle of the Quran. We have the nature of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his character. All of these are arguments for Islam, arguments eventually for the existence of God. But today, inshallah, we'll be speaking and going into some of the rational arguments, which are, I would say, most of which, if not all of them, are mentioned in the Quran itself by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In very simple ayahs, very tiny ayahs, which show that these rational arguments aren't as complicated as it might seem at first glance. They're truly very easy to understand. They just have a lot of jargon to them.
MashaAllah. Can you tell us a little more about that specific argument?
Sure.
For the existence of Allah?
Yeah. One of my favorite arguments for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is called the dependency argument, or it's also more commonly known as the contingency argument. So it's either known as the dependency argument or the contingency argument. And I very truly suggest everyone to go look into it by some very good Muslim speakers. You can send us a message if you want more resources. And inshallah, we'll be speaking more about it in future events. And we have an entire training which just deals with this argument. But the argument, basically, it says something very simple. It says that everything that exists is either dependent or independent. And everything that is dependent has to ultimately be dependent upon something independent. And then that this independent being is God. A very simple argument, I'm going to say again. Everything that exists is either dependent or independent. Everything that is dependent has to eventually be dependent upon something independent, and this independent being is God. That is the basic form of the argument, and you'll find some renditions of this in the Quran. You'll find renditions of this in the stories of the prophets and whatnot, where they see things and realize that this thing is dependent, and because it is dependent, it cannot be God. It cannot possibly be God, and has to ultimately be dependent upon something independent. That is the basic argument. We will go in more into that, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Brothers, you're watching the Pulse podcast by Uplift Dawah. Barakallahu feek for being here. We're now getting deeper into the argument, the rational argument for the existence of God. Before we do that, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem, there are a lot of brothers and sisters out there who might have doubts in their hearts. We want to clear out and equip them with the arguments necessary to protect their deen and fight for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intellectually. So make sure that you share this, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem, and we will go deeper into this argument, bi'idhnillahi kareem, and ask some questions so Brother Anas can really get deeper into this for us. Share it on all of your platforms. Perhaps maybe one person might come back to Allah who had doubts in their heart, and you will get the reward, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. So do share it, inshallah. Barakallah feek. Also, we are having a giveaway. This is the mug that we're going to be giving away today, inshallah. It's branded with the Uplift Dawah logo. This coffee mug here will be given away, inshallah. In order to win this, all you have to do is go to our Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, Twitter, all of them at Uplift Dawah ORG. At Uplift Dawah ORG. Make sure you subscribe to all of them, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. And then go to our Instagram, tag 3 friends, inshallah. Make sure you are a subscriber already. Then tag 3 friends and comment done. That's all you have to do. Go to Instagram, subscribe to all of our channels, go to Instagram, and then type a tag 3 friends and then say done, inshallah. We will pick randomly someone who will win this, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. Jazakallahu khair. So what makes something dependent, Brother Anas?
All right. There's a lot of criteria which makes something that exists either dependent or independent. For example, I will mention, I think, 2 or 3 of them without going into a lot of detail because it'll take time. But one of the most basic ones is if something has physical limitations to it, or if something has certain physical characteristics or certain physical attributes to it. The reason why this makes it dependent is because if you see, let's take a table, for example. If you see a table and the table is 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, has 4 stands that the table sits on top of, the question that your brain automatically asks you is, because it has 4 instead of 5, it has 4 feet instead of 5 feet, someone had to choose to put 4 feet into place in the table. Because the color is brown of the table, whereas it could have been green, it could have been red, it could have been orange, someone had to choose to put that color onto the table. So, and it's hard when you first think about it, but this truly goes on in your brain every single day, every single hour, without you even thinking about it. So you look at the table and you ask yourself, you tell yourself that there are certain limitations to this table. There are certain ways that it is, and it could have been any other way. It could have been another color. It could have been another shape. It could have been another size, which leads you to believe that this is dependent upon the thing that chose to put it in that color, that chose that size, that chose that shape and whatnot. Also, one thing that makes something dependent is simply if it begins to exist. Because if something begins to exist, you have 3 options. Either it created itself, it just popped out of nothing, or something created it. We know that nothing can create itself because it's logically impossible. We know that nothing can pop out of nothing because, again, that's logically impossible. The only conclusion that we have, the only option that we have left is that something had to create it. So if any object, if any existence has a beginning, has a time where it started, then that means it is dependent and it is limited upon the person that, or the being that created and brought that thing into creation. So if we extend this concept of dependency and this concept of dependent things having to ultimately be dependent upon something independent, and you apply it to the universe, you understand that according to modern science, which is the best that we have when it comes to science, is that the universe came into existence, which tells you what? It tells you that something had to create it, something had to bring it into existence. There's other criteria. For example, the universe has certain physical characteristics, has certain physical limitations, such as the Earth is the 3rd planet instead of being the 4th. The Earth could have been bigger than it is. The sun could have been a ball of ice instead of a ball of fire. It could have been so many different things in the universe. And literally an unlimited amount of things come to mind when you think of it could have been this way or it could have been that way when you look at the universe. So that tells you that the universe itself is dependent upon something which chose to put it in that specific way, that chose the Earth to be the third planet, that chose the sun to be a big ball of gas and big ball of fire. And that leads you to the conclusion that this being that created everything has to be God, because God is independent, does not depend upon anything else.
MashaAllah. You know, it's interesting. Sometimes I hear the argument that atheists bring whenever we talk about these things, and they always have the same question, and I don't think anywhere without really hearing this specific question, and that is, if everything is dependent, then who is God dependent on? Or they put it in another way: if everything was created, then if everything created, then who created God?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
How would you answer that question?
This is one of the most common questions that people bring up, and they think it's a easy dispute, easy refutation of religion, and easy refutation of God's existence or whatnot. But it's very illogical when you look at it. Honestly, very illogical, because first of all, our definition of God is that he's independent, which by definition means that he's not dependent upon anything. So asking that question doesn't make sense. The reason why it doesn't make sense is if you say that God has to be dependent upon something, or that the creator of the universe has to be dependent upon something, the next question you'll ask is, okay, what is that thing that the creator is dependent upon? What is that thing dependent upon? And you go on and on and on and on in an infinite regress. I recommend people look that up, read what that is. But an infinite regress is if you keep going in the past, constantly you're going in the past without any point of stopping. You just keep going, and this and this and this and this and this. Same thing when it comes to creation of the universe. You'll keep going till a point where you never stop. Who created God? Who created the thing that created God? Who created that thing? And on and on and on. And we know that if there is an infinite past or infinite chain of events in the past, there cannot be a present. Because if there's an infinite past, then that thing that we're trying to trace back truly never started, because we're constantly going back. And if it never started, then we're never going to get to the point that we are at. For example, it's my favorite example. If you go to McDonald's, let's say, and you order a burger, and you realize that the burger does not have what you ordered, or the meat is not halal or whatever, and you go back to the cashier and you ask them for a refund, the cashier is going to tell you that, no, I have to call my manager because I'm not at a high enough position to give you and authorize myself to give you this refund. So he calls his manager, and that manager tells you, this is not at my pay grade, it's above my pay grade. And he says, let me call my manager. And that goes on and on and on for an infinite amount of time, for an infinite amount of managers. So if there's an infinite amount of managers in the past, there's never going to be someone that tells you that, okay, you can take the refund, we're going to give you this money back. Now, in another scenario, if you go and ask for a refund, and eventually, whether that be in 10 minutes, whether that be instantly, whether that be after, let's say, even 20 years, if you get the refund, that automatically means that there is a point where there is an ultimate manager, a manager who has no one above him, who is the ultimate boss. That's the same thing with the universe. If you keep asking the question, who created this, who created that thing, who created that thing, on and on and on, you would never get to the point where we would have the universe, where we would have any creation for that matter. But in an alternate scenario, which we're living in right now, just the fact that we have something that exists, just the fact that the universe exists and that we exist, that tells us that there is a point where everything started. Absolutely everything started. And this point, this thing that started everything has to be all powerful, has to be all knowledgeable, has to be the creator of everything. without having a creator itself. And that leads you to the conclusion that this thing that we're talking about is none other than God.
That's incredible, because without having somewhere where everything kind of started, you're just gonna have a constant going back, and it's gonna be infinite, never ending. I like to use the example of giving someone $1. I want to give you money. Let's make it even more interesting. Let's say $1,000. I want to give it to you. You're excited. You want to get it because it's $1,000. Maybe you'll pay some like a rent or something. And there's infinite amount of people in between me and you. And whenever I stretch my hand, someone takes it. And so there's infinite number of people in between us, always coming, never ending. Will you ever receive that $1,000? And the answer has to be no. So that's what you're saying. You can't have something that continuously goes back. There has to be a certain point where the buck has to stop somewhere.
Exactly.
Would you say then that morality is kind of the same thing? Like you require some solid grounding for all of our morals when it comes to human beings and ethics and so forth. And without having grounding, you are pretty much your own God because you're making your own morals. Would you say it's the same thing?
I would say to a certain extent, it is the same thing. And the reason I say that because a lot of people dispute whether morality truly exists or not, because you cannot, again, they try to use science to prove it. You cannot see and observe morality and all of that. But everyone knows that every single human being believes certain things are good and certain things are bad. Certain things are beneficial while certain things are harmful. And this leads us into another point of how people bring arguments against Islam, trying to claim that what Islam is saying or what you Muslims are doing is immoral and it's wrong. But when you truly examine their claim, you realize that they have no basis for what they're saying. For them, morality is just making up whatever they wish. If someone says this is good, and if everyone in the room agrees that this is good, it is good. The next day, if that same person says this is bad, and everyone in that room agrees with him that this is bad, it is bad. So the only way that you can have objective morality, the only way that you can have true morality that never changes, is if you have a creator, a God that exists outside of this universe, outside of everything that exists. And that God is all knowledgeable, all wise, who can tell you that this thing is wrong and it is going to be wrong forever. This thing is right, it is going to be right forever. And that we, alhamdulillah, we have in Islam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see throughout history, at one point, people considered racism, what we consider a horrible, heinous crime right now. People, that was normal. Anyone spoke out against racism, they would be tortured and whatnot. But now we know, and the entire world almost agrees that racism is a horrible, heinous crime. And alhamdulillah, this leads us to such benefits when we have Islam as our grounding, because we have an objective source of morality, something that tells us that this is always going to be true, this is always going to be false. And we know this is true because we examine whether the Quran is from God. And if it is from God, then everything it says has to be true. So if society tells you that something is wrong, just like science, in the future, society will change their views. In 10 years, in 15 years, in 100 years, but they will definitely change their views on whether something is right or wrong. And alhamdulillah, as Muslims, we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should be, in fact, content and happy in the fact that we have an objective source of morality that tells us this is good and this is bad. We stick by that, we don't get pressured by what society says, and we just listen to the God that brings us the truth through the Quran and the prophets. So in a sense, yeah, morality is like that.
Subhanallah, that's amazing what you just said, because we are already winning simply by knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us something that is beyond time. Subhanallah. So while society is creating their own morals, and by um, seeing whether it works or not, changing it and then rechanging it and changing it. Society is always confused and is trying to adapt new things to try and fix things. But because they don't have all knowledge, they're constantly making mistakes. And the reason why what you said is so profound is you said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the ultimate morals that are time bound. Subhanallah. And so it's not always changing and flimsy the same way it is with societal morals that they create. The fact that you have people like Hitler and who convinces a society to do some heinous things shows you that creating our own morals is really bad. Because it's always changing and we do really bad things, subhanallah, right? This is why you require justice, and this is why you require a grounding, an objective ground of all of our morals. And so Allah has given that to us to go away from that and to now try and accept society's rules and morals is actually bad. It's ridiculous. And so we as Muslims need to understand this wholeheartedly and come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that we can follow the morals that Allah has given us, which is timeless, subhanallah. So it's profound what you just said. Brothers and sisters, you wanted to say something on that?
No, I don't think I need to.
Okay, perfect. Brothers and sisters, you're joining the Pulse podcast by Uplift Dawah. Barakallahu feek for being here. We have a couple of more questions, inshallah, but before that, make sure you share this with all of your brothers and sisters who might have doubts in their hearts. The idea of doing this for you today is to clear some of those doubts for the brothers and sisters out there. So by sharing this, inshallah, you might benefit those brothers and sisters to remove those doubts from their hearts. So please do share this, inshallah. Again, if you want to win this coffee mug, it is yours, inshallah. All you have to do is make sure you subscribe to all of our platforms. Go to Instagram, tag 3 friends, and then comment done. Inshallah, bin Kareem, and we will choose someone randomly. It's been an incredible conversation. We're going to continue and bring more of this for you, inshallah. We have a couple of more questions, so don't go away. Make sure you share this, inshallah, so that the people can benefit. Get in the comments what you would like to see in these podcasts, what type of topics you'd like to see discussed, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. Let us know if you are appreciating this, if it's benefiting you, what you have benefited, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem, and we'll try to bring you relevant content, inshallah. Barakallahu feek. The last question, or the couple of last questions, 2 last questions that I do want to ask you, inshallah, is there are many people out here who want to continue this. They want to know more. Especially those people living in Seattle, Washington. And for those who are not, I know there's a lot of content out there that they can follow. Inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. Maybe suggest a book or two. And then for the people who are living in Seattle, I know that Uplift Dawah has got a lot of things going on. Can you tell them more, inshallah?
Definitely. First of all, anyone that's listening, first, jazakallah khair for tuning in, inshallah. We're planning a lot of beneficial things with a lot of different people on the podcast and on different things. So stay tuned. First of all, that's one thing that I would ask everyone to do. Uplift Dawah, for our local brothers, Uplift Dawah has numerous trainings on specific topics. They have basic trainings, they have advanced trainings. We have trainings on atheism, trainings that just purely speak about science. One training that just deals with the dependency argument. It goes very much in depth with it. Makes it easy to understand and easy to use. So stay connected to Uplift Dawah. Email us. We provide all of these trainings, alhamdulillah, free of cost. So email us. Let us know that you want to book a training, and we will make sure we come to your masajid or to your any gathering that you want to have. Books that I would recommend. There are a lot of books that I could recommend. on a variety of different topics. And in order for the recommendation to be best for each person, I would ask that message either Uplift Dawah on Instagram, Facebook, whatever platform, or message me on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever platform. And I can give you my personal recommendations, or I can give you recommendations of people much more knowledgeable than me. Also, if you have any questions regarding these topics, any people that want to convert to Islam or just have questions about Islam generally, come to us. Uplift Dawah helps you. Uplift Dawah also has an entire program dedicated to supporting, to taking care of you Muslims, making sure that they're supported and they have all the resources that they can possibly have in the stressing times of after accepting your shahada. Yeah.
Barakallahu feek, jazakallahu khair. If you want to have a conversation, if there's some doubts in your heart and you want those cleared away, and you want someone to have a conversation with you from Uplift Dawah, go ahead and email info@upliftdawah.org, info@upliftdawah.org. If you have questions, please make sure you go ahead and send those questions as well, and we'll try our very best to answer those questions bi'idhnillahi kareem. Let's take a look, inshallah, and see if there's some question there. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, says Brother Abu. MashaAllah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think you know Brother Abu, yes?
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. May Allah bless him. He does a lot of work on this stuff as well. So Brother Abu asks, what is the difference between absolute morality versus objective morality? Would you like to take on that one?
Sure, if you want to.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because I didn't differentiate and I should have. So absolute morality is the concept that something is good regardless of what context you're in, regardless of what time, what situation, what place you're in, and it will always, every single moment, be good. Whereas objective morality is something which comes from an objective source. An objective source in this case, in the world that we live in, would be something that exists outside of our universe, something that has knowledge of everything, something that has power over everything, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is God. So when God tells us that something is good or something is bad, it is an objective evaluation of everything that's happening in the universe that God already is aware of. And that is what gives us the knowledge that this is true regardless of what we think. Because regardless of how much a person tries, they have subjective aspects of their thinking that make their evaluation of any case different than what others might think. So you can never have an objective understanding from people inside the universe because they're affected by things around them. So objective morality is from outside of the universe, from God, and objective morality can change in some scenarios. For example, at a point in Islam, we know that khamr or alcohol was legal. It was allowed. It wasn't haram like it is now. In the past, even during the Prophet ﷺ's time. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that from now, alcohol will be forbidden. Alcohol is not allowed. This tells us that, as we know, there's numerous examples of morals changing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself telling us that now this is allowed or now this is impermissible for you. And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-alim, he's all knowledgeable. He knows that at this specific point or till this specific point, this is what is best for the people. And then after this point, we have to change it and we have to make it so that this is what is better for the people. So objective morality has to come from an objective source. It is possible for objective morality to change, but it has to come from the same source, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas absolute morality is a belief that morals should never ever change, regardless of what time or context. For example, if someone says that killing is wrong, absolutely, and it's an absolutely morally wrong that killing is and is condemnable, then it would say that even when you're in a scenario where someone's broken into your home and is threatening you with a gun to kill your family, God forbid, then even in that case, killing them to protect yourself would be wrong. Whereas objective morality says if you're trying to defend yourself, you can do whatever, right? You can defend yourself to a certain extent. So objective morality can change according to the scenarios, but there is a framework for how it can change given to us by an objective source, whereas absolute morality never ever changes.
That was beautifully put. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. In other words, if you say absolutely you cannot kill anyone, it means you can't kill anyone at all. But objectively, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not kill, but except for these reasons. And that's what makes it objective. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Jazakallah. I think this was really an amazing discussion. But as you know, this opens up so much more. People want to know so much more. And they want to have more discussion about these. If you want to know about these things, please do let us. If you want us to have these type of conversations or talk about these type of topics, please do let us know. Comment, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. And we will continue to bring this type of content for you, inshallah. But in order to catch this content, make sure that you are connected to our subscribe to our YouTube channel and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, all of them at Uplift Dawah org, at Uplift Dawah org, and you'll be able to catch all of our content there, inshallah. Share this, because there might be many brothers and sisters out there who have a lot of doubts in their hearts, and this will help clear all of those things out for them, inshallah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for benefiting them, inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. This has been quite amazing. I want to thank you, Brother Anas, for the time and really discussing a very difficult topic and making it very simple. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. As a 17-year-old, I don't think people know this. As a 17-year-old, is there any advice you want to give to all of the brothers 17 out there about da'wah and why they should get involved in da'wah and so forth, inshallah?
I'm in no position to give advice, but if I was forced to, I would probably say that surround yourself with people who are more knowledgeable than you, who are on the right path. Inshallah, they will help you out. And get involved in da'wah, get involved in studying Islam, because once you truly realize the beauty of Islam, it attracts you, and you just, like magnets, you cannot move away. And I hope none of us ever move away from the straight path, inshallah. Those of us that aren't on it, may Allah guide us there. And general advice would be that always stay connected. Any question that you have, and this is my biggest concern for the ummah, is that any question that you have, don't let it sit inside your mind and don't think over it for too long. Go to people in your community, ask them questions, ask knowledgeable people questions. Uplift Dawah, alhamdulillah. There's no question that we haven't been asked, regardless of how nasty, regardless of how bad you think it is. Always come and ask the brothers at Uplift Dawah. We never judge anyone, alhamdulillah, and we will try our best to answer your questions.
Barakallahu feek. Jazakallah. I really appreciate it, Brother Anas, for taking your time and being with us and really dissecting this important topic. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit all of our brothers and sisters that were here, that were listening, and those who will play it later. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit with it and to accept it from us because we are not worthy of the positions that He has put us. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us, to accept it from us, to purify our intentions, and to always forgive us for our shortcomings. Allahumma ameen. Everything that we have said that is wrong is from us, and everything that is good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we thank Him for everything, and may He make it easy for us to continue doing da'wah. Allahumma ameen. Brothers and sisters, jazakallahu khair for being here. It's been quite an amazing conversation. This has been an interesting, eye-opening conversation with our brother Anas. We've discussed many things, many topics. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We talked about how brothers and sisters should stay away from equating science with Islam and the Quran. Quran is not equivalent to science, is not equivalent to Quran. Make sure that you separate the two, because one is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the other is from humanity. And so those two things are two totally different things, inshallah, binillahi kareem. We gave you an argument, the dependency argument for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the argument which taught you how to explain to someone that everything is dependent, and it requires something that is independent, that all things depend on. And so our brother Anas explained that in detail. Now you have that. You can explain that to an atheist or a brother who might have a lot of doubts in their hearts. And so, alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, we broke it down and help you understand that science is limited. Even though science is great, we love science as Muslims. Hassan ibn Haytham was the one who gave us the method of science, the method we use today. And he's credited by the Western science community for doing that. So Muslims love science, and Brother Anas explained to us how, although it's limited, it can't give us everything. It is limited and it can't give us everything. Therefore, we love science and we use it as a model, but it can't give us answers. It definitely cannot prove God, but it could point us to the direction that there is an independent creator who created all of these things. Make sure you take this, inshallah, share this with your brothers and sisters that are out there. We need the Muslim community to really know about these topics and to solidify it in their hearts. Jazakallahu khairan for joining us. It's been an absolutely exciting topic for us. We will bring you more. And I thank you for joining us today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Comment, let us know what your thoughts are, what you think about this, so that we can more conversations like this, if this is what you want. Inshallah, bi'idhnillahi kareem. Barakallahu feek. Jazakallahu khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and we will see you soon.